Hello, today I'm going to do a quick tutorial on how to do a rather nice looking space scene using only Photoshop and the tools that are included with it. This is useful for if you're doing like textures for 3D models or games. If you want to have a really nice wallpaper that you've made yourself, can also be pretty useful. But this is a very quick solution, and it's very simple. So to start off with, you'll want to start off with a new document, whatever resolution you think you'll need. If you're doing this for a texture, like if you're doing a skybox for a game, or skydome, sorry, you'll want to keep this at a square power of 2 ratio. So anything like 1024 by 1024, 2048, 2048, stuff like that. But if you're doing a wallpaper, obviously you'd want to set this up to your your screen resolution. The first thing you'll want to do is fill the background with black, and create a new layer. I tend to just duplicate this layer, so I have 2 black layers now. On the new layer, just call that stars. On here you can do, we'll create a star effect. So you go to filter, noise, add noise. Make sure that it is set to 25% for the amount. The distribution should be at Gaussian, and it should be monochromatic. Right now this is a bit dense, but we'll mess with the level adjustments tools and get this to look more realistic. So go ahead and add it with these settings. So now, like I said, this is a bit dense, so we'll want to make sure that we decrease the density and make it look like some of the stars are closer and some are farther away. So the best way to do this is to make sure that you have your adjustments panel open. If you don't, you can access it from the window adjustments. So make sure you're selected on your stars layer and click on the levels button in the adjustments panel. This will create a new adjustment layer right above the stars layer. And the best way to get a nice star filled sky effect would be to just mess around with these sliders under the levels until you get something that looks realistic. What I found is if I drag the gray channel closer to the white, this will decrease the density and also make it look like some are smaller, some are closer. And then you can also drag the white channel down so that you get some more brightness out of these. So just mess with these sliders until you get something that looks good and realistic. And I think this looks good for now. Alright. Now we want to isolate this adjustment layer only to the stars layer. So what we're going to do is hold the Alt button and click right in between the stars and the level adjustment layer. And what this will do is, if you're unfamiliar with this, this isolates, you can see over here by this little down arrow on the levels layer, this isolates anything that's in this layer to only affect or have its effect on the layer that it's connected to. So right now this levels adjustment will only affect the stars. Okay, so now that we've got the stars, we want to, I still think that this looks a bit too dense. A little bit more variety would be good. So we're going to accomplish this through masks. So make sure you're on the stars layer, and this is optional. I personally feel like this might be a bit too dense, so this is entirely up to you. You can skip this part if you want. So go to the stars layer and then add a mask by clicking on this third button down here on the bottom of the layers panel, and this will add a new mask. In this mask, I'm going to use the cloud filter. So just go to filter, render clouds, and you can hit Control F to redo the cloud effect, making sure that you're selected with your mask until you find something that you think looks good. And I think this looks fine. This way, some of these stars are a bit brighter, some are further, a little darker, smaller, feel like they're further away. So it's not like there's a sheet of stars, and there are actually some variety to the depth. So this is a very quick way to get a nice star field, and if this is all you need, then this is where you can stop. But I'm going to go ahead and add some gas clouds to give this a bit more, to make this a little bit more interesting than just a plain star field. So above the layers, the levels adjustment layer, I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to call this gas cloud. Always make a habit of naming your layers. If you don't, you will eventually, if you're working with really large files, that can be a big problem if you're not starting to name your layers. You can get lost, not sure which one is which, and makes it a bit more frustrating to work with. So build this habit as early as possible. Alright, so on the gas cloud layer, I'm going to fill this with white. And I'm going to once again do the clouds effect on this. If you already have done the cloud effect with the stars, you can just hit Control F to render new clouds, or if you haven't, it's under Render Clouds. So now I'm going to just render some clouds until I see something that may look rather interesting as gas clouds. I think this looks good. And what I'm going to do is add another levels adjustment layer above the gas cloud, and then isolate it to the gas cloud layer. So I'm going to add this level adjustment, and before I make any adjustments, I'm going to isolate it by once again holding the Alt key and clicking right in between the layers. So now this levels 2 layer is isolated to affect only the gas cloud layer. And once again, I'm just going to mess around with these sliders until I get some nice contrast between these clouds and find something that can be usable. Okay. Now I'm going to on the gas clouds layer, I am going to set the blend mode to screen so you can get the stars through the clouds. And now what I'm going to do is on the gas clouds layer, I'm going to add another mask. And in this mask, with a black brush, I have my brush set to, the size will be dependent on the size of your canvas, but set the hardness all the way down to 0% so that it's a very soft brush. And just go around, and beginning with full opacity and full flow, I'm just going to erase the edges because I don't want any clouds on the very edges of the screen. Unless if that's something you want, you can always do that as well. I think this is good. And then I'm going to decrease my opacity somewhere between 40 and 50%, and decrease my flow to about 30%. And I'm going to go in and just add some more variety to these clouds here. Just go in, make some sections darker so that it's a bit less dense of a smoke or cloud effect. Alright, now with the gas cloud layer selected, I'm going to, on the adjustments panel, I'm going to click the hue and saturation button, and this should automatically isolate the hue and saturation adjustment to the gas cloud, but if it doesn't, you can once again hold Alt and click in between to isolate that. And the way you can tell is if it has this down arrow right to the left. So now on my hue and adjustments layer, or hue and saturation, I'm going to scroll down the properties until I get to this colorize checkbox and click the colorize. Now with the hue slider, I'm going to go slide it to some color that I think looks interesting as a gas cloud. This is a bit intense, and I'm going to actually go in on the mask and brush some more on there so it's not so vibrant. But I think this looks good. Okay, so I'm actually going to go back here and make some more adjustments on these clouds so that they're not so intense. Okay. Now, going to, just for some effect, I'm actually going to duplicate these layers. And now that I've got these duplicated, I can actually do a different color. So I go back onto the second hue and saturation layer, the one that I just duplicated, and pick a different color. And then on the mask, I'm going to actually go back in and do a bit more of finer erasing and masking, and just try to blend the two colors to look a little bit more, to be not as plain, so that there's some variety in here. Alright. Oh, this step will obviously take a bit more of a personal taste, and just whatever you think looks good. That's the most important thing. There's no calculatable method to doing this. It's just, if you think it looks good, then it's done. Okay. So I'm actually not going to, and you can even, I'm not going to do too much more with this, but you kind of get the idea. You can go in, work with clouds to get some nice gas cloud effects. You can decrease the opacity so it's not so intense also. Just messing around with some of these things. It's all about just trying to get it to look good. But you can, so this is a very basic way to do it. You can always go in, if you're a bit more adventurous, you can actually go in, add some planets in there, add like a closer star that this planet is orbiting around. You can add spaceships flying around, space stations. One example that I have here, this isn't by any means very good, but I messed around with these effects and added a planet, and I got this. This was all done in Photoshop except for the texture of this planet. This texture I actually just pulled off of Google Images, but because I'm not exactly sure if it's copyrighted, or I'm fairly certain it's not royalty free. It's not a stock image, so I'm not going to sell this image or anything, but just you get an idea. You can create your own planet effects as well, using a number of the filters that are available to you. But like I said, you can do something that looks fairly decent like this, and this was all done in Photoshop using the filters and effects. So hopefully this was helpful. If you have any questions, please leave a comment, and if you like what you just saw, please subscribe and make sure you check often for more videos. Thanks.